Hi all, Lee here. So sorry, it's been a while since I last did any guitar builds. Just been busy with work and life, things like that. But now it's got to winter. I've got the radiator on in the garage. It's getting nice and warm in here, and I want to carry on with the guitar. So if you remember, what I wanted to do is design my own guitar and make a template, something that was I could reproduce over and over again. And the last, where I got to before was actually creating the body. So this is the shape I came up with. Sort of a little PRS, but it's offset because I'm going to use a bolt-on neck. And I haven't finished the body, obviously, because I just want to make sure I get the scale length correctly with the bridge. So that's as far as I got with the body. What I want to move on to, obviously, is the neck. So I've got the wood for the neck, so the neck wood, which is walnut, and an ebony fretboard. But the main thing I want to consider here is the ongoing order of operations to get this done. And I think it's quite important. So what I've done is I've actually written down the order of operations here. And I'll just explain a little of my thinking. Now, I don't know if this is the best way, and I may change my mind later. Let's just put that in there. Hopefully you can see that in there. So first of all, it would be route out the truss rod channel. And also I need to take 5mm off of the neck. So this piece of wood is actually 20mm thick for the neck. But the headstock I only want to be 15mm. It's sort of based on a fender design, so it's just a flat design. So what I need to do is take 5mm off the top here, off the face of the headstock, because it should only be 15mm. And then obviously on a fender, that's what sort of leaves the angle from the nut to go down to keep tension on the strings to the machine heads. So because both of those operations need the router, that's why they're sort of, I've put them under the same area. So I'll get the router out, I'll set that up, and it will be route out the truss rod channel and also take the 5mm off the face of the headstock to put it to size. The next thing I need to do is glue on the fretboard. That's obviously quite self-explanatory. After that, this is where things could change. But what I want to then do is, first of all, cut the entire neck shape with the fretboard already glued onto the neck. So I can tidy that up and make the neck shape. And then the next step will be to use my two jigs that I've created. So I have a radius jig and also a neck carve jig. And I want to use those. So the first one will be the neck profile. I'll use that jig first. And there's a specific reason why I want to do that before the fretboard radius. And that's because if I cut the fretboard radius first, when I try and mount it into the neck carve jig, because the fretboard is then curved, it's going to be much harder to keep it flat. Whereas if I do the radius last, even if I cut the neck carve out, the back of the headstock and also the where the screws go in to put the neck into the neck cavity, well, they're still flat. So when I mount that into the neck radius jig, it's still got stability because I've got the two flat areas. So that's the reason I'm doing it that way round. I hope that makes sense. Then of course, finally, we're going to fit the frets to that and tidy all that up, do the fret finishing. So that's my order of operations. I think this is the best way to do it. So the first job really is to get on and set up the router, and we'll start making our first cuts of the neck. So let's get on that now. So I don't know if you can see that too well on the camera, but I've already got the center line in, and I've also got where the nut will go, which is up here. So the next thing is I just need to route the channel for the truss rod I have here. So I just want to double check the depth that I actually need for this. So just take a couple of measurements. It's around 9.5mm. Don't know if you can see that. But I just want to measure both ends just to make sure, and also on the truss rod, it's actually slightly thicker at the bottom here. So really I want to know at this end, when I put the slightly larger router bit on, just to take this piece, it actually needs to be slightly deeper as well to account for the slight difference. Hopefully you can see that as well. So this is slightly thicker. So it looks to be just over 11 millimeters. I think that'll be about 11 millimeters. So I'll do the main channel at 10 millimeters, but then I'll just drop the router down 1 more millimeter just for this end when I put the thicker router bit on. So let's get on and do that now. Okay, so that looks pretty good so far. Let's just take a quick look just to make sure it's the right length. And that length is really good. So the next step is just to put the slightly larger router bit on, just to make the cavity for the hex head. So let's do that now. Excellent, so all that's been routed out fine. It looks good. So let's just check the truss rod fits in nicely. And there we go, it is a perfect fit. Oh, I'm really pleased with that. It's absolutely spot on. Just a very slight lip on the wood. So it's the perfect depth. Obviously, before you glue the fretboard in, it's always good to put a piece of tape over this so you don't get glue inside the truss rod. But that is absolutely spot on, so I'm really pleased with that. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is cut 5 millimeters of depth off the face of the headstock because it actually dips down. But there is one critical cut I need to keep in mind. Just after the nut going towards the headstock, obviously I want to carve out a nice rounded section into there so it goes smoothly into the headstock after the nut. So I've had to set the jig up and I've put an end piece on so my router has got something to lean on, because I need to keep sort of, I don't know, probably about 5 millimeters away from the back of the nut, just to give me enough room to sand that into a nice curve later on. So that's the important cut. But once I've used the jig and put that one nice straight line in there, the rest of it I should be able to just do sort of by hand manually, because it just needs to be all perfectly flat, but 5 millimeters lower down. So let's get on and do that. I actually had an angled router bit that I could use, so I've already put a nice angle on there, about 4 millimeters down, so that'll just save me some sanding later, and then I can just bring this back into a nice curve later on. It's probably quite hard to see on the camera, but now what I need to do is just put a normal router bit on and take the rest of the headstock down 5 millimeters. So just before I take this headstock down 5 millimeters, I thought I'd better put some sort of jig together. It's just a few other 20 millimeter pieces of wood, because obviously as I take this headstock down, I'm going to need something to support the router on. So it's all level and straight which means I should just be able to run along here, and it should make it much easier to get a good finish. So let's get on that now. So now that's been taken down 5 millimeters, it's looking pretty good. So the next step, I believe, is to get the fretboard glued on. So the main thing I need to consider with the fretboard is which side looks the best. Get a center line on there and line up the center line with the neck, and we'll get that glued on. So let's do that now. So that all looks good. All I need to do then is get the glue, put some glue on here, and we'll get this all glued together. So the first thing to do is obviously remember to put the truss rod in, and then I just want to put a piece of tape over this. So that goes in nicely, and then I just use black insulating tape. The idea is when I'm spreading the glue out, I don't want all the glue to go into the truss rod. So let's just put a piece of this over, and then we can get the glue on. Now just get this lined up and clamped on. So this should be glued now. So all I do is I take off all of these clamps. Yes, I use a lot of clamps to make sure it's glued down correctly. We'll take off the clamps, we'll take a look, but then I'll sort of finish the video there. And the next video, I'll start cutting the neck out. So the radius, the profile, the shape, all of that sort of thing, and start sanding the neck into the shape I want. So let's get these clamps off and take a look. So there we have it. Neck The fretboard is glued on the neck. Everything looks good. Really pleased with how that looks. Yeah, that's really good. Really pleased with that. So I'll bring the video to a close here. Catch me on the next one when I start cutting this out. So until next time, I'll see you later. Cheers.